Okay, so till now we have seen different types of for loops that we have, which is traditional for loop, for off loop, and for in loop. We'll see like the different other different loops that you have in terms of TypeScript, which is while loop and do while loop. Again, these two are also similar wherever we use and whatever the programming that we use in all the programming language. While and do while will always be same again. So let's start with the while loop. How do we declare what is the use of while loop? When can we use that? And so on. This will be a while. Okay. So while loop is also similar to a for loop itself. Um, the only difference that it has is while loop will have some kind of condition. As we have written in terms of the for loop, we have seen that the for loop, uh, the traditional for loop contains basically three of the things, which is initialization, condition, and increment or decrement. While loop will also take the similar kind of things, but inside while we'll only be taking like a condition, and then other things will be inside the curly braces. That means inside the block of the code that we'll be writing for while loop. Here, there is a slight difference between like for while and do while. So in terms of while loop, what happened is like, if you talk about the for loop, for for loop, we take three of the things inside the for itself, which is initialization, condition, and increment or decrement. Whereas in terms of while loop, we first have to declare or initialize the initialization part, which we have to declare a variable and initialize a value for that, which will again be a similar like the scope or significance of that particular initialization will also be same, where it will it will just initialize the variable so that it from there on it will start execution of the loop. That means that will be a starting point of the execution inside the loop. Then condition will go inside while loop, and then again increment and decrement will be writing inside the block. So let's try to see how do we basically um, write the syntax for while loop. What is the what is a syntax for while loop first? So if you talk about the syntax that we have in terms of while loop is it is again very simple. It's very simple. Like comparing the other for loop that we have seen. One is the first will be like initialization. So we have to initialize a variable before writing the loop, and then we can write a while loop. So the while keyword will come into picture, and then inside that while loop will be writing a condition. And again, block of code. Block of code in the sense inside the curly braces. Here, all the code that we have to write will be go inside the curly braces, and then again, increment and decrement will be a part of this over here. Increment or decrement will be basically it will also go inside the curly braces itself. That means inside the block of code itself. Okay, so this is a general syntax that we follow in terms of while loop. Let's try to write a program that we have written in terms of like whenever we have to get or whenever we have to print like from 1 to 5 or from 0 to 5. How do we do that? Here if you see in terms of for loop that we have written, it's something like this, in which we have which we have used a keyword as for. We've initialized a variable which is I equals to 0, and then this is the condition, and then this is the increment part. So we have given a condition which is I should be less than or equals to 5. As soon as it becomes 5, then break the loop, like terminate the loop. like the loop will be terminated as the condition becomes false. It is also exactly similar in terms of while loop as well. So in terms of while loop, what happen is it will take a condition inside the while, and all the whatever the code that we write inside the while loop, which is like inside the block of code, will keep on executing unless and until this condition becomes false, which is similar in the case of for loop as well, right? Then the question is like, if we have a for loop which is similar kind of uh, equal to while loop, then why do we use while loop, or why do we use for loop? So as we discussed yesterday, that whenever we know that how many times of iteration that we have to make, that means if we know if we know that we have a fixed number of iteration that we have to make, or that we have that the loop has to go through, at that point of time we can use a for loop. That means we know that here we have to go through with six number of times, which is 0 to 5. So it will keep on executing for six number of times. That doesn't mean like if we know the execution, like how many times we have to execute, that doesn't mean like we cannot use while loop. We still can be able to use while loop for that as well. But it is always better in terms of writing the code, or in terms of writing the programming, that whenever we know that we have a fixed set of iteration that we have to do, we can go for directly by utilizing for loop. But whenever we do not know that how many times we have to navigate through, or how many times we have to basically iterate inside the loop, like whatever the code that we are trying to write, if we do not have a beforehand understanding that how many times it has to execute the loop, or it has to iterate through, then we can go for while loop, because while loop takes a condition. So as far as the condition be true, the code will keep on executing, or whatever the things that it has to do, it will keep on executing. As soon as the condition becomes false, the loop will be terminated. Okay. So let's say how do we print the value from 0 to 5 or 1 to 5 by using while loop? A simple example over here. And then I'll also give you some kind of cases where we can use a while loop in terms of test automation as well. So first thing, it says that we have to initialize a value, initialize a variable, right? Initialization. Uh, this this is a like very simple, exactly similar to for loop, where for loop also takes the three things: initialization, condition, increment, and decrement. And in terms of while loop as well, it takes the three things. But there are like um, placement of this initialization, condition, and increment are different in for and while loop. So in terms of for, we have initialized the variable inside the for itself, whereas in terms of while loop, we have to initialize a variable before running the loop. So let's say here, we'll say it as int j equals to 0. Okay. And now we have to start with while loop, which while j is less than or equals to 5. The similar condition that we have given for the for loop as well. Okay. And then we have to simply write a console log j. Okay. Here also we have written a console log I. But now if you see over here, this thing that we have written inside the for itself, even initialization and increment also have been added inside the for itself in terms of for loop. Whereas in terms of while loop, we have to write increment or decrement over here, which is d plus plus. Okay. So there is just a slight difference in terms of for it. This initialization and increment or decrement also was in the same line inside the for itself. Whereas while, what it does is it just simply take a condition, and every time it will keep on validating whether the condition is true or false. Whenever the condition becomes false, will be the action will be again taken similar to the for loop. That means the loop will be terminated. The complete loop will be terminated. But initialization we do before starting the loop itself, and then increment or decrement will go inside a curly braces, which means inside a block of code in terms of while loop. Now, if you again try to execute this this simple code that we have written, you'll see that it will again print the similar values, which it has printed in terms of the for loop. So if you see over here, it is again printing the same value, which is from 0 to 5. Okay, so this is another way where we can take the help of while loop to execute um, to do like or avoid repetitive code. That means the same code that you know that it will be executing multiple times, then you can take the help of any kind of loop. So while loop is also similar to for loop, but only the difference that we have just gone through is the initialization and increment will happen just before and inside the while loop respectively. Now there is again one more thing that, let's say, one concept over here in terms of while loop is if you forget to increment or decrement. If you forget to increment or decrement over here inside for while loop, then it will basically become a infinite loop. It keeps on printing the first value itself because it has not incremented the value, and it keeps on printing the similar value all the time. Okay, so that we have to take care in terms of while loop. That is what the syntax over here is. The increment and decrement part will be inside the block of code. That means inside the while loop itself. Okay. Now let's see. You can also do the similar things that we have done earlier for decrement part. That is just an assignment that you can check it out. Like try to print the value which is let's say even number value from 20 to 0. Okay. So just take an assignment as uh, print only the even number value from 20 to 0. You can either use for loop, you can use both basically for loop as well as while loop and try to check it out. I'll just give you a hint that here we know that it basically says that J++. So what is J++? J++ is basically J plus 1, right? J++ is equals to J plus 1. That means it will increment or decrement. In terms of minus minus, it decrement. In terms of plus plus, it increment, right? So what we are trying to print the value, we are trying to print the value from 0 to you can also do like 0 to 20 and 20 to 0, both of the factors. So how do we do this? We are trying to get value which is even, right? So whenever you try to do something like instead of J++, if you just say it as J plus 2, this will become over here, which is similar to J plus 2. Okay. So this is just an hint that how can you achieve this particular things. So if you make it over here, J plus 2, and let's try to run the value, you'll see J plus 2. So you can just check it out. You'll basically have to make it equals to J plus 2. There are another ways. Just try to check it out if you are able to do that. If you are unable to do that, then I'll show you like how can we make this in terms of this a simple way where you can write it out by using J equals to J plus 2. But if just try it out if you are able to make it with J plus plus. If not, I'll explain you how can we write in terms of J plus plus as well. Okay, so this is just a part of the assignment that you can try to check it out um, for loop and while loop. Now let's see when can we use while loop in terms of test automation. So first thing is if we do not know the number of times the iteration has to execute. Iteration has to execute. Okay. That means if we do not know how many number of times we have to execute the loop, at that point of time, we can use while loop. What can be the example for this? So first example, um, let's say you are on any social media app, right? Let's say you are using Facebook, you're using Facebook or you're using LinkedIn, right? And then you are trying to search for some of the posts. Let's say you're trying to search for posts that I have posted on the LinkedIn or I have posted on Facebook. So if you're trying to search for any of the posts that Praveen has posted, either on LinkedIn or Facebook, so what will you do in that case? Basically, what you will try to do is, in general, you will scroll down on a page, right? Every time you'll keep on scrolling and to find it out, where is the page, where is the post that I have posted. So in that case, we do not know that how many times we have to scroll on a page, right? How many times we have to scroll on a page, we do not know that. That means whenever we have to do infinite scroll, here we'll not be able to understand whether we have to do a one-time scroll or two-time scroll or n time of scroll to find out my post that I have done on the LinkedIn or Facebook or any other uh, social media app, right? So at that point of time, we'll have to use a while loop. We cannot use for loop because we'll not be having any kind of idea that how many times we have to iterate the loop. So at that point of time, at this point of time, we can basically use a while loop. Second, this was just an example for the post. Let's say if you are trying to make it up. Second, let's say if you're working on some other let's say if you're working on again on the website, and then you are trying to search again one particular element which again appears on the lazy loading kind of lazy loading or lazy loading in the sense like some part of the value will be loaded on the page, and again once you scroll after that some part of the result will again be loaded on the page. That is known as lazy loading or pagination. In terms of pagination, what will happen is we'll have a previous button, then we'll have number one, number two, number three, and so on, like number pages, and then we'll again have a next button. So let's say we are trying to search an element which can be available on the first page, which can be available on the second page, third page, and or an nth page. Okay. So to find that element, we always have to click on next, 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 and so on. Like that means next button to go to the next page. Again, click on next button to go to the next page. Here we do not know how many times of again we have to click on next button, right? We do not know like whether your element can appear on the first page itself, or it can appear on the second page, or it can appear on the third page, right? So at that point of time, to use pagination wherever the pagination is available, to work with that, we have to click on next, and at that moment, we'll not be having any idea that how many times we have to click on next button, right? So this is another example where we have to use a while loop to keep clicking on next button unless and until our element is visible on the page, right? This is again one of example, and third option that we can provide is like the third option can also be used with the do while loop that I'll again explain. But what happened in terms of login pages, for all the login page, like we'll have a login page where we have to find where we basically have to fill a username and password, right? Username and password. What happen in general is we'll allow user like some of the number of times that if your username or password have been um, you have not filled correctly the username and password, then we'll keep on throwing you the error. Let's say if you're trying to store that value like username and password that user has entered, right? So again, there can be a chances that a user can fill wrong username and wrong password can be multiple number of times, right? Uh, it we cannot say that 100% of the user will fill all the like username and password 100% of the time correctly, or even in the first attempt itself they'll be able to log in successfully into the application. So at that point of time, again, we can use a while loop because we do not know how many times user has to enter username and password to get it correct. So for that also we have to we have to check by using again while loop, saying whether username and password is correct or not, or whether username and password is matching or not. If the username and password is matching, then only allow the user to um, access the other part of the application. So there also we can use a while loop. Most of the development team use a while loop over there to check username and password are correct or not. So these are few of the examples where we use a while loop in terms of test automation. Okay, any question over here or confusion? Any confusion or question?
No,
Okay,
good, good.
okay. So let's talk about now the next one, which is do while loop. So do while loop is also similar to while loop. It is exactly similar to while loop, but there is a slight difference in terms of do while loop is it is similar to while loop. The declaration and other part uh, will almost be similar to while loop, but only the difference is that it guarantee the loop will run at least one time. What is mean by that? At least one time before validating the condition. Here, in terms of while loop, if you talk about in terms of while loop, we have seen that first it initialize the value, which is also the similar case in terms of do while loop as well, and then it checks the condition over here, right? In terms of while loop, it checks the condition. Whereas in terms of do while loop, it first print the value and then it will validate the condition. So that is what it is saying, that it will guarantee us that at least uh, one time, uh, at least one time the loop will be executed. It guarantees the loop will run at least one time before validating the condition. Let's see the syntax for do while loop. The syntax for do while loop is again close to this while loop where we do the initialization first. Initialization of the variable will be done first, and then it will start with do keyword. And whatever the code that we have to write, that means block of code will go inside the do. Right? So here the code will appear, whatever the code that we write or test script that we write will go inside the curly braces. And inside this itself, we'll be writing increment and decrement as well. Increment, increment, and decrement as well. Okay. So plus plus and minus minus. And then this do block will get closed over here. And then after that, as soon as like we complete this block of code, after that, the while loop will, that means while keyword appears, which takes a condition. Okay. And this will end with semicolon. This is mandatory that this will end with semicolon. So this condition will be validated after printing or executing at least once. What happened in general in terms of do while loop is as soon as the loop start, it first print the value and then increment the value. And after that, the condition will be validated. Let's see in terms of this, however, we have written in terms of the while loop, how can we achieve by using do while loop as well? So here we say that In terms of while loop, if we see, what did we do? We have first initialized the variable. So here also we'll be doing the similar kind of things where we'll say not int, where we'll say it as that k equals to 0. That means we have initialized a variable. I believe we have already used k. So let's a equals to 0. And we have already used 0. Let's L equals to 0. Okay. And now it will start with do keyword. Inside the do keyword itself, the block of code will go. Okay. Inside the do itself, the block of code will have to write. So what do we do over here is we print the value, which is, let's say console log, console log. So CGL, console log L. So to just write a console.log, there is a shortcut you can use as CGL. As soon as you print CGL and click on enter, it will directly display the console.log. Okay. So we'll say it as console.log L and now increment or decrement the value, which is L plus plus. Here it will be L plus plus. And now the while appears over here, which will take a condition. So the condition that we are trying to write is L is less than or equals to 5. Okay. So what it will do is, as soon as the execution starts, and we have to end it up with semicolon. Apart from that, at other places we do not require semicolon, which is an optional in terms of TypeScript and JavaScript. Apart from that, if you see like in terms of the do while loop, it first start execution. So what it will do is it initialize the variable that we have declared over here, and then that variable will be printed. Currently, we are printing the value. Whatever other action that we have to do, it will try to do that particular action. And then it will do an increment or decrement. After that, the condition will be validated. So if you see over here in if you try to execute the code, you'll see that do while in general, do while in general starts execution, but first it will try to print at least one time. So what will happen is it will first print 0 value over here. This 0 value will be printed first, and then it will try to check the condition, whether 0 is less than 5 or after increment, which is 1 is less than 5 or not. If I just show you the example, which is let's say greater than or equals to 5, right? So what will happen over here is, let's see what is happening over here. So it has given us a value which is 0, right? What happened over here is it first initialized the value which is L equals to 0, printed the value 0, though we know that the condition is false, which is 0 is greater than or equals to false, 5, which is false, which is not true. In terms of this, in terms of while loop, if we use the similar condition where let's say j is greater than 5, greater than or equals to 5, nothing will be printed over here. Earlier we have seen like 0 to 5 will be printed, but in terms of now, if you see in term, for while loop, nothing have been printed because it validated the condition first. It validated the condition that 0 is greater than or equals to 5, and it becomes false, and the loop got terminated over here itself. Right? Let me revert it on. But in terms of do while, if you see, though we know that the condition is false, it at least execute one time the code. So if you again print it out, you'll see that it at least executed one time, which have printed as a 0, and then the condition have been validated. Okay. So this is what the difference between do and while. Apart from that, everything is same. In terms of do, it will at least guarantee that at least one time the code will be executed. Okay. Now, what is the use of, or when can we use while do while loop? So one situation can be like, let's say, we are trying to search for an element visible on the page or not. Okay. So what we have to do is we search for an element appear like visible on the page or not. And after that, we'll try to click few of the things, or if you try to click on that particular element, some other element will appear, right? So what can we do is, though playwright, in terms of playwright, it will automatically be taken care in terms of like visibility of the element and other things. But in general, if we have to achieve this kind of scenario that I'm talking about, we can use a do while loop. So let's say you are waiting for an element. So first you have to validate whether the element have been appeared on the page or not. And then you will click an operation. So at that point of time, we can check, we can use a do while loop to check whether the element have been appeared or not. So it first validates whether the element appeared on the page or not. If it is not validated, then again it will keep on executing, keep on checking, like whether we have to wait for few seconds or whether we have to, whatever the action, other action that we have to perform. Okay, so at least it will first validate whether the element is visible or not. If the element is visible, then only perform some kind of operation. Okay, by providing a while condition. Or let's say if element is not visible, then we have to scroll inside the web application. Okay, so for that also, at least we have to first check whether the element is displayed on the page or not, an element is visible on the page or not. If it is not visible, then run the loop for scrolling part, right? So for that also we can use while loop, do while loop to find out the element, by checking the visibility and then scroll. So first time it will check the visibility of an element and then it will start its scrolling. Second, let's say you, let's say second thing is you are trying to get some kind of input from user, right? So you are trying to get, let's say, as I discussed over here in terms of while loop, you are trying to get username and password from a user, right? So here also we can use do while loop. How and why? Because do says that at least I'll execute one time. So at least it will first get the values from the user. That means it will get the value, which is username and password. And then it will first try to execute that username and password, whatever the user have filed. And after that, it will try to check the condition, whether the username and password that user have filed is basically correct or not. So it will first get the input value from the user for the first time, and then it will try to check the condition whether the input value that we have received from the user is correct or not. Okay. This is for like username and password. Third, let's say we have a banking application. Example, let's say we have a banking application where after logging into the software or logging into the application, we ask the user whether you want to withdraw the amount or you want to, let's say, transfer the amount. Example, I'm talking about transfer the amount, or you want to do some kind of account checking and all. So for that, banking sector will do some kind of things like it will just give a notification like 1, 2, or 3. And based on the input that user provide, it will take the user to the either withdraw, transfer, or account checking. There are other things as well. So what it will do is it will ask a user to fill the number, fill the like input value, whether you want to go for withdraw, transfer, and account. So for here as well, we can use do while, because we get the input from the user and then check what is that input inside the while loop. First, you get the input from the user, and then again validate whether the input is matching with any of the three things or not. If it is not matching, then again ask the user to input the correct value that they want to go for. Okay, so here also we do not know whether a user will enter the correct things at the first time, second time, or nth time. So for that also we can use a do while loop to at least get first time the value and then validate whether everything is correct in terms of going for the next transaction, which is like either it can be withdraw, transfer, account checking, or password setting and any other things. Okay, so there also we can use a do while loop. So this is all about the loop that we have in terms of TypeScript. Any question in terms of looping that we have gone through with the different for loop, different kinds of for loops and while and do while loop?